Hosmer. Hosmer, you can do better than that. We went up the road and got one that's stainless lined. But it's still nice. Anyway, this is a notification for some of you out there, just so you know that I've tried it before in the past and it's worked, but in mobile equipment, it appears that the new coolants are not, if you have the old pipe dope and you're putting in a black heater like we just did yesterday, don't. You either have to use the heavy duty Permatex style stuff, that has a little bit of a sharp smell to it. And because the one I had was ptfe type of stuff, put it on there nice and thick. I'd cleaned out the threads. What came out was taped. Big plug, like a 1-inch. And he got the appropriate OEM for some reason. It just had to have OEM, and they had it in stock. So it's one of those things where maybe you don't want to pay the money, but they have it. The other places have to order it. So that kind of thing where it made sense to pay the extra. Ouch. And we put it in there, but he was going to mix the antifreeze himself. He was just glad that we got this part of the procedure done. Because I'm older, it's one of the things that's working out pretty well is that general diagnosis, general repairs, things that the customers don't feel comfortable doing themselves. I get a call, and they're not necessarily, these are all people I know, so it's hard to call them customers. It's like friends call me for work. And because a lot of them I've known for years. I've been down here in the area, back in the area, I should say, since 2001. June or July, can't remember which. But someplace, let's say the end of June. And so 6 months into 2001, here I was. Known a fair amount of them since then. And that puts it over 20 years, right? Been a few years. So we put the thing in. He was going to mix the coolant himself because he got concentrate. Then I started thinking, well, it's a lot more money to have it mixed. And I said, yeah, there's a reason for that. I said, why? It doesn't make sense. And I said, it almost does. The processing of the water that they put in with the coolant is harder. It's probably more stringent than the coolant itself. So what do you mean? I said, they, what do you call it? But anyway, it's processed, it's distilled, that's the word I'm looking for, but it's deionized as well. It's deionized, yeah, to help prevent cavitation. And he just says, okay, yeah, it's distilled for one. That helps the process, but deionized means there's no extra ions floating around. It can't create, how can I say it? The water moving through the block doesn't create an electrical field. As strange as that sounds, that's part of it. Of course, the other ion part isn't so much going through creating an electrical field. It's a chemical reaction. Is ions, available electrons, that is. So they're trying to make it stable. No extra stuff in the water. And to do that, I think they actually have to put in a certain amount, because if a human drinks pure distilled water for any period of time, it'll actually leach out some of the, how can you say it, minor minerals in your body and cause trouble. I've heard that story. So in this case, I think it's kind of deionized is mainly in the electron sense, electrical chemical reaction type. So there's a lot that goes into that water that's added into it. You say, where do I get stuff like that? I said, well, the only place I know of. Somebody else gave me another idea later, but some of the stores have distilled water, but not necessarily deionized. And distilled, deionized, you can go to a local drugstore usually is where you can get some of it. So, because most of the stuff in the stores is filtered, not necessarily distilled and or deionized. So that's why it's more money. It's just $1 more a gallon for it to be mixed. Doesn't make sense. And speaking from experience, the idea of the stuff using local water makes sense to one hand. It's problematic on another, because here in New York State, if you have well water, normally filtered well water would be fine, but the problem is you can't filter out sulfur. And that one's critical. Any amount of sulfur, it doesn't matter if it's minuscule, and the only time you smell it is if you leave water sitting in a jar and a day or two later when it's gassed off, you smell it. No, that's bad. It doesn't matter that you drink it, you can't taste it or any of that. If there's any sulfur in there, it will become acid and it will start eating your engine. Fact. It's even worse when you can smell it, of course. But we found out that your average pipe dope isn't going to do the job. The stuff I have here from, I believe it's Permatex, is smooth and well mixed. And the other one that's even better yet is Teflon tape. Never use. Stop. You don't use Teflon tape in hydraulic fittings in complex hydraulic systems. Period. You don't. You say, no, wait a minute. I've used it, yes, on the other side. I, too, have used it in former systems when I started working at Anderson Equipment. Even though I came from farm and truck at the time, I sat there and looked, you sure you want Teflon tape in here? Yeah, why? Okay. So I start putting tape on it. And another guy comes out and says, it's a Komatsu. You never. I said, I hear what you're saying, but I was given orders. Well, yeah, but I said, no, I know what you're saying. You are correct. Should not use it. If wrapped wrong, the Teflon tape is a problem. You have to wrap the tape one thread back, if not another thread back further, and get enough tape in there to seal. And you say, well, then that kind of negates it can. And number two is when you're talking construction equipment, never use Teflon tape. But beyond that, never use pipe fittings, and you won't have to use any tape, any dope, none of the above. Now, wait a minute. No. If you use Teflon tape and pipe dope in any other type of fitting, you are an idiot. I say that unequivocally. There is no give and take. There is no. It's not like saying if you can put tape on this fitting properly, it'll work. But under the wrong conditions, it'll be a disaster. That's not even that. No. None. No pipe fittings, no Teflon tape. And if it's on any other type of fitting other than pipe fittings, you are an idiot. Let me explain why. All of your BSP is British pipe, so you will be using tape or dope there, or proper TFE stuff. However, BSPP, British Standard Parallel Pipe, not just British Standard Pipe, British Standard Parallel Pipe, is a mechanical fitting. Yes, you can put the BSP in some BSPP fittings. Some. But it doesn't work well because it's not a matching taper. It's straight thread versus BSP tapered thread. All right? So still, it's a thread seal. It's not a mechanical seated seal. BSPP parallel thread has an inverse where the male thread actually has a seat, internal seat on it, and the female thread has a cone, but a loose nut. So sometimes it'll be called swivel. And the internal cone, or the cone out here on the end, goes inside the pipe and the seat, tighten it up. The only thing that's decent about that, that's kind of unique, is as you tighten the nut up, if you over tighten it, it swells the thread, buries itself in both the seat and into the nut. Well, what else can it do? Yeah, it can lock it up, screw it all up, make a mess. I see, no, wait a minute. Okay, American side has something similar, but they still use the tapered thread. They put a seat on the inside here and the same inverse seat in the swivel nut. But they use the same NPT, National Pipe Thread, in the pipe. And the flare fitting. Inverted flare, as they call it. Because normally your flare is on the pipe with a nut. Now this one, it's in the fitting. You say, but that's kind of, yeah, I know, but that's the deal. Flare, you flare the pipe. But the seat's in the center. I know, but it's called inverted flare because something that represents a flare is the backwards one on the other side in the fitting itself. So those are two similar ones that work. The British tends to go with higher pressure, 4,000, 4,500. They'll even put it up 5,000 plus. What are we doing? We use JIC up to 5,000, but it's probably only good and safe and consistent 4,500. But yeah, you can use it all the way up. I've done it before. But normally you put it on an excavator or something, or a loader or a backhoe. The skid steer takes accessories, so you'll be using JIC quite often. Why? Because it's simple and easy to get a hold of, and you're into a unit that on your auxiliaries you're going to be limiting it to 3,000 or 3,500 pounds of pressure, which JIC is perfectly fine for. I want it with an O-ring. JIC can leak and then you're screwed. Yeah, and the O-ring can leak and it's too easy. The O-ring has one major failure. I'll describe it in a minute. But JIC is mechanical, correct? Yes. Used too many times, yes, you lose your mechanical seal. But put the same fitting in the same fitting in the same orientation, you're probably going to seal again without much trouble. They take quite a bit of crush, and they rarely leak, but they can. What's the beauty of JIC versus any other? There's no other seal in there. So you can loosen the nut and relieve pressure without changing anything. Unless you have 10,000 plus psi of pressure that's going to burn through that seat area and take metal out, you'll be able to loosen up severe pressure in almost any system. Cover it up with get your wrenches on it, cover it up with a rag to protect yourself, or put a piece of cardboard or actual board or tin or something in there, your eyes and everything. Face shield if you really seriously need to. But quite often, just a rag or a cloth or a shirt or something over there will take care of it. Psst, all done. If it's a long one, you're hooked to an accumulator. No. Now you got a problem. You crack it till it leaks, and you've got the rag and everything around it. Walk away. Let the thing hang, but until it's out. And then when you're done, shake it again, covered, not your hand, covered with a rag or tin or something else. Shake the hose. So that's the beauty of JIC. You aren't going to hurt anything doing that. Your O-ring face seal is designed to be hand tightened in the field in an emergency for the military. And I have seen it and can tell you between 1.5 and 2 turns, that O-ring will keep expanding up into that groove until it finally blows. When it does, it takes the O-ring out. Some of you say, well, I've done, yeah, that has been done before. Loosen it up 1 turn, and sometimes you can cock the fitting enough to relieve it. But you're still talking a 50-50 shot if you're going to use that little bitty, teeny, tiny, thin O-ring again. It's that little teeny, tiny, thin O-ring is designed to be teeny, tiny, thin to fit into a teeny, tiny groove so that as it backs out, it can expand easily. But it isn't going to take a lot of pressure on its own. And they do not take misalignment well. Now the Brits and some others, DIN is similar to the Brit and our inverted flare. You have a DIN light and a DIN heavy. And when you get into the British and the DIN, I think DIN light in particular, it might be heavy though, but I think it's light. They put an O-ring in there. On that inverted flare, they put a little groove and an O-ring in. Now some places, if you have somebody with a brain, you can get another O-ring. So it works like O-face and assembles like inverted flare. And it's a better seal. Same thing. You loosen that up, that oil pressure coming out of there, you're probably going to eat your O-ring. It survives better than the O-face, flat face. ORFS, O-ring flat-faced seal. Others have different names for it, but that's the common one in industry. So, but some of them will call it FFS, flat-face seal. Take your pick. I know there's another one for it that Eaton uses, but Weatherhead, don't care. Parker was the originator with John Deere, as far as I know. But there we are. That's why when you're using pipe thread, you use dope because it is a thread seal, a tapered seal, but it's not a seated. You say, but the thread and the thread. But threads can get galled and dug, and they're imperfections. You don't have exact diameters. The thing that made the thread for the pipe is not the thing that made the thread for the female thread side. They're 2 different things. So they are not exact, and you end up with trouble there. Well, maybe you have. I've used 1/8-inch pipe thread fittings in my test stuff out there, up to 6,000, 6,500 psi. You can't do that with pipe thread and anything much larger than it. And I will repeat this to you again because I watched it and laughed my face off. I had hydraulic fittings, a good selection of them, went out to test hydraulics, and 3 times in a row, because that's all I had, I watched a brass fitting split. I used it in farm equipment up to 2,500, 2,800, dozens of times. Doesn't make any difference. 3,000 probably the limit. Anything above that, once you hit 3,500 and 4,000, you're into a different category of pressure trouble. Read your hoses. And you get a hose made and just have them all look at all the 2-wire hose. And you'll see the pressure drop from around 5,800, 5,200 on a quarter. Sometimes only 4,800, depending on the type of rubber they use. And it'll go on down until you get to your 1-inch line that'll only be about 22,000, 2,400. But everything's the same. Larger diameter. There's more total pressure on the hose. What do you mean? 4,000 psi. Inch. PSI. SI. Square inch. It's a lot more square inches on that. Hence, pressure reduction. Because it's acting on a square inch over here, and here, and here, because of the diameter, and a little 1/4-inch hose, you don't even have a total square inch in one circle. Hence, more holding pressure. Don't tell me it doesn't work. I've seen the ratings, and I've seen them blow. I've actually had hoses rejected because they went out in the field with a relief value of 3,000 to 3,500. Someplace we set it in that range because of a hammer we had on there, but out into the field, and a return hose was 2,400 psi, and it was rejected. There's nothing wrong with that hose, but it didn't match the pressure of the system, and they didn't want people accidentally, this hose blew, so they swapped it. They didn't want any of that. Both hoses, and a return hose would only see maybe 1,000 psi, and then the hammer isn't going to function anyway. They didn't want somebody saying, hey, I can use that hose over there and put it on some other accessory that would be over that pressure. Nope, not the gas field. Just a warning. It doesn't matter that it is equivalent and effective for the purpose that you put it on there for. A lot of people just like lifting chains. Everything on that lifting chain has to exceed the load. In fact, quite often what that chain attaches to, they want to exceed the load of the chain or strap that you're using. Anything. So they want you to be cognizant of what you're lifting with, and everything attached to it exceed that limit. Because there are times we got out in the field and they'd gripe about, that better be rated, that better be, and I'd pull it out and show them the serial number tag, and just that alone would back them off. What do you got for clevises? I think I was only asked that once in all the years. So anyway, just something to keep in mind. Ratings are there for a reason, and then follow them. You'll say, well, I put 2,400-pound hose on a 3,000-pound, and it worked just fine. Yeah, because your burst pressure is 2.5 to 3 times. So what are you talking there? Yeah, now you're up at 7,000 burst pressure. But that's hose. That crimped fitting isn't going to be there. Especially if you had somebody crimp it that didn't use the crimp chart. That's indeed. So, to go back to it, we had a leak, and he sent me a picture, and I said, I'll stop by tomorrow and fix it. He said, nope, don't bother. He says, I know where to drain it, and I know how to handle it now. So a lot of my work is, just like here, education. For you, both from numbers and experience. And you'll say, well, you don't have anything on the web. You don't have a book. You don't have a chart. You don't have... That's right, I don't. I'm going to tell you what a customer said to me one time. I'm an engineer. I'm a pilot. And he went through a whole list. And we were talking. I just sat there and looked. Yep. Well, good. So what do you mean good? So then you know my numbers are correct. You worked in metallurgy with engineering, right? Well, yeah, but then you know that the numbers I gave you may not be exact, but in general they are correct. As soon as a material reaches 600 degrees, it starts to discolor towards blue, violet, and at 650 there's a problem, and at 700 all the properties of that metal, steel in particular, are gone. Correct? Yeah. I'd say a little higher, but I said, so in other words, if I heat this anymore, you aren't going to have a nut left, or a shaft, or a yoke. And he says, oh, okay, we'll take care of it. That was a Komatsu guy working on a Kawasaki. And we did not have enough stuff to take that nut off, not because of the torque, but because it was rotted on there and loctated. So that's one of the reasons why I don't have charts. If I have a basic understanding of it, that's what I'm going to give to you, because if you're out there watching this video, a vast majority of you are either going to be the curious guys that are going to generally agree with my numbers and techniques and such, and the other guys that are inexperienced. So if you sit down and want to write in something for the other guys to understand, and you're at my level or higher, then please put it in there for them. For me, I'm so dang old I have to sit down and read the instructions sometimes. Why? It's not whether I've forgotten or not. It's because I have too much information over the last 63 years to go through on too many different type machines. And you get my drift? It's like putting a search into the computer. The more stuff you have, the longer the search, right? So sometimes just go to the dang book. And if you were able to see here, I think I have in the neighborhood of 20 download PDFs in both my phone, diagnostic computer, and here on this tablet. Specs are important. Now, the interesting thing about PDF is that by the time I download it, if you download it from the manufacturer, if you can, the original or the supplier of the information, if there's any updates, then they will be brought forth into it. But buying it from the aftermarket people like I do, e-manuals online, farm manuals, and gen sales, you're going to get generally the old manuals, not any new updates. So it's still good to go out there and listen and read and find and discover, but at the same time, if you got an old tractor and the manual you just bought in PDF looks old, well, it's for that old tractor. So there you go. Just don't use any old paste on any old thing. Customer had it, we tried it, didn't work. I've done that before where it has worked. So that's why we tried it again. But apparently the new coolants with some of their salts and acids, etc., and you say salt is I know. But that's what they tell us is in some of these. So I don't know which that he bought. I just know it's original equipment Kubota. It's organic stuff that's in there, and it didn't like this pipe dope. Because what I put in that steel hole had a good solid plug. Took it out, cleaned it out, put the dope on, and put a brass heater in there. And the brass didn't seal. So something had to give up other than the mismatch of the thread, which is possible. And I'll leave you with this. The difference between British thread and US thread in pipe threads, okay? The BSP, British Standard Pipe, and our NPT, National Pipe Thread. If you go to the 1/8 inch alone, there's 1 thread per inch different. I can't tell you which way it is. And the British is a smaller diameter. Why? The only thing I can figure is if I go to buy they do these funny things between the US and the Brits. But I don't know the specifics, but I'll tell you what I've run into before. If you go down and buy a 3-inch bearing, that bearing is 3 inches. 3.000. If to 3.001, 1/1000ths, in that range. They punch the hole to fit that 3-inch bearing. Here in the United States, you bore a 3-inch hole and you fit the bearing to the hole. It's something similar. They're just different enough that I was warned by Linwood Hand Farm Center years ago, who told me that it's not, that you can't put the Brit bearing in an American hole. You can't put an American bearing in a Brit hole. Excuse me. Just the way of life. So remember that. And you say, well, if it's a 3-inch bearing, it's going into an American hole. Okay, they're just not going to work. One will be too loose in the other hole, and the other one will have too much of an interference to even get in the hole. Just say. All right, now that's for you folks. And you have a good day. I have to go out and work on a couple of home projects now, and probably a different home project later. I got a piece of wood over there that I need to make another work table out of. I'm starting to get more work tables that fold up and put away because my long workbench is starting to get crowded with drill press and little mini tire machine, a tire installer for the lawn and garden stuff, and a vise. I did, I think, 3 or 4, 5 lawn and garden tires in a month. Only 2 of them I got paid for. The others were mine. I got tired of wrestling, so for $100 I bought one. I think I used it once. As per usual. So how often? I've got 4 lawn tractors. Actually, 2 are lawn tractors and 2 are actual garden tractors. And then I got the snapper rear engine rider. So there you go. That's for you. It's time for me to get to motivating and finish Debbie's little wine doodads. Let me show you these things. I came into a minor problem, so we'll have to make a change later, but she got her wine bottle that she was using. She can reach and grab the top to pull it out. The front is open. She can just see what's in there without pulling it out. The other side was that when I cut this out, I've been gluing them on the back here because of this ridge. So does it make that big a difference? No. And when I put it down here, there's still a small gap, but it's less than half the gap that it would have been. That way when it hits the wall, it'll be more parallel. It'll be a little stronger from flexing. And it's not holding one layer, it'll be holding 2. Is it that important? No. But you play with the ideas. No, I had a real cool idea. Drill through the front here in the center, and I measured it and went 180 out to drill through here. I thought if I countersink it, I can put a screw in there. I don't have anything with a fine enough angle on the drill bit. As soon as I put it in there to touch it, it went straight through. I mean, we're talking 1/10 of a second. It was gone. Nothing I could do. It hadn't gone all the way through, but there was nothing left to screw to. So now you're putting not just a screw, you're putting in a screw and a washer. That kind of fails. So my idea for that one is to get a screw up here, and I'll just put one in down there, but not all the way through, but sink it in the hole. Yes, there's dozens of other things I can do. I don't want to spend that much time. She only wants 3 of these. And I built one too long, 15 inches. I built another one too long, 12 inches. And both of them, I think one of them, the tapers, the 12 inch is a little higher than this, but I put a loop in it, smoothed it out. Nope, she likes the deep V, just like I like her wearing a deep V. But she says she's too old, won't do that anymore. And then the 15 inch, I just bring everything down. This is 10. I just cut a piece of pipe 10 inches and put a cap on it. As you can see, it's schedule 21. Sewer pipe kind of stuff. And you say, why in the world? Well, there might have been a dozen other ways to do it. I was looking for something simple I could get on the wall. They said, well, you're going to hang that in drywall or what? No, actually not. They have 1/2 inch plywood inside the pantry for this. Specifically for that. Well, that's harder to repair. And so, well, you repair drywall too many times, you don't have any paper to hold the drywall, do you? You just got powder. Get my drift? So we went with that. Why? You can fill the hole in at least with the wood filler. And you've got glue and wood inside the same hole. It's heck of a lot better than drywall. And we can move things multiple times without. So we just thought it was far much more integrity in the wall to be able to do this stuff without worrying about it. And I put the racks up there, the racks that are holding stuff now. I mean, please, you're going to tell me drywall will hold as well as 1/2 inch plywood on that wall? With the shelving racks? Really? I don't think so. We had it happen out back. We put them in properly into the drywall. Use the anchors that were supplied with it, supposed to hold. And then one day we were emptying it out and it fell off the wall completely. They said, that's old drywall. Yeah, it was. Do you think new drywall is any better? Just a thought. Catch you later.